It's hard to believe it's been a year since Talentless Nana first finished airing, or at least when I first finished watching it. I've been wanting to make a video on Talentless Nana for a while now, and this isn't my first attempt at writing the script. Before I get into this video, I'm going to give you a trigger warning. In this video, I'm going to be discussing things like trauma and child abuse, recounting my own experiences and comparing them to Talentless Nana. If you think that might be a difficult subject matter for you, then here's your warning now.
はじめまして、柊ナナです。皆さん、疑問に思ってらっしゃるようなので、まず答えますね。私、人の心が読めます。でも、ちょっと空気は読めません。よろしくお願いします。
Generally, I watch anime for one of two reasons. The first is for enjoyment. Shows like Kakegurui and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood are shows that I enjoy because they're interesting. I'd say that most people watch anime for reasons like this. But the second reason is a lot more strange. I also watch anime with characters that I can relate to, and then think about myself. How am I similar to this character? How am I not similar to this character? It's by observing these fictional characters that I'm able to understand myself and put feelings that I have into words. This often helps me cope with my feelings, and makes me feel like I'm not alone with them. Yuri has anxiety, and it's by watching her interactions with the members and analyzing myself that I know that it's okay that I do have anxiety. Abnormal, for sure, but it doesn't make me a freak. When I heard about Talentless Nana, there was exactly one thing that made me want to watch it. Nana uses psychology to pretend that she has the ability to read minds. When I heard that, I was reminded of myself. I've always had this really strange ability, and I don't really know what to call it. I'm able to read people, almost to reverse engineer their thoughts and feelings by conversing with them. I'm able to take in what people say and imagine what they'd feel, as if I was directly in their shoes, almost emulating the emotions as it were. I learn what people want from me very, very quickly, and I thought to myself, maybe Talentless Nana will help me understand this side of myself. Nana's character almost feels like it was made for me to project myself onto. I've generally been fine with my natural hair color, but I've always said that I would love a soft pink color. Look at Nana's hair. Not only is it soft pink, but it's also in twintails, my absolute favorite style to wear my hair in. Her height isn't confirmed, but she seems to be about 5'2" to 5'4", definitely an ideal height for myself. By this point, I was getting ready for a happy, comfortable show where I can see what would have happened in a world where I wasn't born trans, similar to how I watched Assassination Classroom. I was ready to relate to Nana. I was not expecting to relate to her in the way that I eventually did.
能力者だらけの学校に無能力者が紛れ込んでいては疑われるだろう。
なんでそこまでして。まさか君が人類の。
いいや、お前たちこそが人類の敵だからだ。
There's a conversation at the end of episode 1, when Nana pushes Nana off the edge of a cliff. He accuses Nana of being an enemy of humanity, to which she responds that she's not the enemy of humanity, it's Nanao who's the enemy of humanity. The concept of an enemy of humanity is brought up throughout the entire series plenty of times, and it's fairly obvious that it's an allegory for the nature of human hatred. The way we stop empathizing with people that we hate, we stop seeing them as human. We stop seeing them for anything other than what we feel makes them evil. They no longer deserve respect or mercy. They are the enemies of humanity. Left-wing versus right-wing, rich versus poor, Christians versus atheists. This kind of hatred mirrors our own reality. Left-wing people think that the right-wing are heartless monsters, and the right-wing think that the left-wing are whiny crybabies. The poor think that the rich are greedy, and the rich think that the poor are lazy. Christians think that atheists are immoral heathens, and atheists think that Christians are illogical. Neither will actually listen to each other, instead deferring the opposite belief as the enemies of humanity, which can't be reasoned with. The allegory for hatred is furthered when we start episode 2.
彼ら能力者が結託するようなことがあれば、我が国は愚か世界は滅びる。
我ら無能力者は能力者に支配される。すなわち人類の終焉だ。できるか。
In the world of Talentless Nana, there are two kinds of people. People with powers and people without powers. The ones with powers are considered to be the talented, and the ones without them, the talentless. The reason why the military sent Nana to kill the Talentids was mostly fear. Fear that the Talentids were not human, that they possessed no morals or compassion, that they would wipe out the talentless just because they were angry or because they were egotistical or whatever stereotype the military ended up believing in. They believed themselves to be inferior to the talented, despite the fact that the Talentids lost the war several years ago. They believed the Talentids to be the enemy of humanity. This is an incredibly accurate depiction of real-life discrimination. Transgender people have been legally allowed to compete in the Olympics since 2004. Several trans women, trans men, and non-binary people have competed in the Olympics, and none have won any medals. Despite this, people still seem to think that trans women need to be banned from participating in women's sports, stating that a trans woman would have higher testosterone levels, and that it would be unfair to let a cis woman compete. Meanwhile, the general public is kept completely unaware of the reality of the situation, much like how the general public is entirely unaware of the deaths of the talented that are occurring on the island. So, talented good, talentless bad, right? Well, not really. It's made clear that most people don't really hate the talenteds. Most people aren't really bigoted and are fully capable of living peacefully with the talenteds in the world. Most importantly, there's a big elephant in the room that we haven't even addressed yet. Nana.
母と年の離れた兄がいたそうです。
なぜ伝聞系なのかな。
覚えていないのです。兄は私が物心つく前に家を出ていましたから。
ご両親は何を？
父は能力者関連の庶務を扱う省庁に勤めていました。母は幼稚園の先生です。二人とも殺されました。
誰に？
陰惨な悪意を持った人類の敵によって。
As mentioned before, Nana was sent to the island by the military to kill all the talented individuals that have gathered there. Nana has absolutely no special ability of her own, except for military training that she received from a young age. As we progress through the series, we start to learn more about her. She has no family, her birth parents were murdered. The family that she was left with were abusive. She believes, in no uncertain terms, that she was directly responsible for her parents' murder. She accidentally left the window open, and it was believed that the murderer entered through the window, thus making it her fault. She's repressed her feelings the entire time, only bringing it up at gunpoint, and when she gets flashbacks. She can't keep it back. The entire time that she's been killing talented, she's been justifying it to herself, using the same logic that the military has fed to her. The talenteds are the enemy of humanity. They are all dangerous beings, those who will murder for their own gain if they're given a chance. Even if their talents may be harmless, even if they act kind on the surface, all talenteds have a potential kill count, lives that they could endanger. And thus, it's her job to kill the talenteds, to ensure that the talentless will survive. She doesn't want any more children to be taken away from their families. She can't trust anyone. She's all alone in her mission.
私がだらしなくて不用心だったという事実は揺るがないのです。
それでもナナちゃんのせいじゃないです。勉強したことがあるんですが、子供は理不尽な目に遭うと全部自分のせいだと思ってしまうことがあるんです。よく考えてみてください。ナナちゃんは普通に遊んでいただけなんですよね。ご両親を殺害したのは誰ですか？ナナちゃんじゃないですよね。
これがミチルが連日浮かない顔をしていた答え。ずっと私を慰めようと知恵を絞って。なのに私は怪しんでばかりで。
もう苦しまないでください。苦しまないでいいんです。私は何があってもナナちゃんの味方です。お友達です。
友達そんなの。
明日は定期便が来るので校庭でお店が開かれますよ。一緒に見て回りましょうね。
いいの？私なんかがいいの？
Spoiler However, it's not going to stay that way for long. Throughout the entire series, Nana had been getting along with a girl named Michiru. Michiru's talent is being able to heal physical wounds at the expense of her own lifespan. She's a kind-hearted girl that Nana has been openly exploiting throughout the entire series. She'd stab herself and use Michiru to heal so that she could be a class leader. She'd lie to Michiru to get evidence that she mistakenly came across. Nana has pretty much used her for her own benefit with absolutely no remorse. Why would she feel any? To Nana, Michiru's hiding something. There had to be a string attached. There's absolutely no way that anyone would be as kind as Michiru is, let alone a talented. When Jin transforms into Michiru and attempts to get to know Nana, Nana doesn't figure out it's not Michiru who's pulling the strings until she realizes that Michiru isn't using the nickname she normally does. She has no trust in Michiru at all. She entirely expects that Michiru would attempt to accuse her of not having a talent. Kindness is just a way of getting things from someone. Even as Michiru listens to Nana's breakdowns, Nana tries to tell herself that she's only talking about her problems to manipulate Michiru for later. However, one night, she realizes she made a mistake. She had a bottle of poison hidden inside her old clothes that were torn up, and Michiru was the last person to have touched the clothes. Nana instantly thinks that Michiru has the poison, and that she went to talk to Kyoya about the poison because she was too afraid to confront Nana by herself. While Michiru is taking a bath, Nana snoops through Michiru's diary, trying to find out what Michiru's got hiding. She's shocked, however, to find the truth. Michiru hasn't been lying to her. She genuinely believes and cares for Nana. Jin even scolds her for even thinking that Michiru had any ulterior motives. He then notes that Michiru has been taken a long time in the bath, and that she's probably in trouble. His conclusion was entirely spot on. Michiru is lying in the bathtub, passed out. Nana notes that if she left Michiru there, Michiru would surely die. She attempts to rationalize things, her brain telling her that it would be a perfect time to kill her. There would be no need for any action that would bring any suspicion. But it's clear that while her mind is telling her to leave Michiru to die, her heart is thinking otherwise. She tries to rationalize her actions as she saves Michiru, and independently nurses her back to health. The day after she wakes up, Nana confronts Michiru. Why do you save people? Why do you save even the ones that hurt you? Nana asks. This was her reply. When she was younger, Michiru was often bullied by others for her talent. Her ability to heal wounds was mocked, and it caused her to hate her talent. She came across an injured dog, and Michiru healed them. The dog's owner was a delinquent girl who told Michiru to not be ashamed of her power, and that she was truly amazing. She stood up for Michiru, and they became good friends. After some time, Michiru spent more time working at the hospital, and her friend had been going to school less and less. One day, she passed out for the first time from excessively using her talent. There, in the hospital, she talked to her friend again. Her friend told her that she had cancer. Michiru was heartbroken. She could heal physical wounds, but she had absolutely no ability to heal illnesses like cancer. When her friend died, she knew that she wanted to be a doctor. Nana was completely stunned. Nana was presented with an existence that she didn't know how to comprehend. Someone with a kind soul and no ulterior motives. She thought back to the kill count that the military had told her about. She started to trust Michiru and doubt the military. She then has a mental breakdown. Her abusive past, her guilt, all of it was brought up into conscious thought. She snapped out of her thoughts and Michiru enters the room. Michiru confesses to Nana why she went to talk to Kyoya. It wasn't about the poison. She doesn't even know about that yet. It was her trying to sort out Nana's mental health. Michiru told Nana that even if she had forgotten to close the window, her parents had cleaned her room that night and they definitely would have locked it. As Nana tries to argue if she remembered right that her room was clean in the morning, Michiru gets visibly upset. She explains to Nana, when children endure tragedy, they often blame themselves for everything. It's not Nana's fault. She was a kid. She was not the one who murdered her parents. Michiru holds Nana tight, as she wonders if she even deserves this kindness. It's here that I speculate that Nana fell in love with Michiru. I've heard people argue that they're just friends, and to that I just say, lying in bed hugging a pillow that your female friend gave you, blushing like crazy, is not something that straight girls do. So, Why do I relate to this character so much? I won't lie, this is difficult for me to talk about, but I feel that it's important. My birth parents aren't exactly dead, but they may as well be. But from what I was told, they were neglective and they smoked in the house a lot. It aggravated my asthma, and Child Protective Services had to take me into custody and into a foster home. I was 2 years old when it happened. I was placed in foster care, and unfortunately, they were abusive. They'd laugh at my failures and ignore my successes. If I ever upset my little brother for any reason, I'd be beat, or in worst cases, strangled. All of my birthday gifts were given to my brother instead of me. I survived the only way a person can in that situation. I've learned how to subconsciously read people. I figured out what a person wanted from me, and what they wanted me to be, and gave them that. I manipulated and lied to get any scraps of attention that I could. To me, everything that was happening was completely normal. Something that I was used to, something that everybody had to deal with, and thus not something I really needed to talk about. One day at school, we had a stranger danger conversation, warning about the bad things that a person may do to us if we trust strangers openly. It was strange to hear that the things that I'd been dealing with every day were considered a bad thing that I should be getting help for. So one day I did report it. In the end, nothing came of it. My foster parents were angry, of course, and I'm lucky I talked my way out of things. As expected of someone in that situation, my worldview was very bleak. It was very clear to me that there were people who were out to make my life miserable, and so naturally I assumed that I needed to do the same. If I wasn't a jerk to people, then I wasn't fitting in. I often felt bad for the things I did, but I told myself that I needed to stop feeling bad, because no one else did. I considered empathy and honesty to be defects in me, and not strengths. Even though I was made to go to church every week, I never once believed in a God figure. If a God existed, then he wouldn't have made the world this way. In this world, you either inflict pain or feel it yourself. A cold, cruel world this was. When I was 8 years old, I was offered with adoption, and I, of course, leapt at the opportunity to leave. But when the final decision was made, I was hesitant. With me gone, would they turn on my sister? That's what I thought at the time. I was told by my adoptive dad that I wouldn't be going back regardless, so I made up my mind, and I went with the adoptive parents. If you think that being adopted made all my problems go away, then unfortunately, you'd be wrong. My worldview was very much still the same. Hurt or be hurt. Love is a lie that we all use to manipulate each other. I needed to act out in order to be noticed. My adoptive parents, of course, didn't know this. They thought that I had anger issues, and thus I was taken to many doctors trying to figure out what was wrong with me. They spoiled me plenty, continuously buying me treats and toys, experience I never got to have. Other than my Game Boy, I had never really gotten gifts that weren't just directly intended for my little brother instead. All I knew was that I liked it, and I didn't want it to stop. At the time, I was neutral towards my adoptive parents. I treated them as I treated everybody else, people to be used. There were 3 things, however, that made me actively hate them. The first was partially my fault. I'd worked up the courage to tell about the things that happened in the foster home, but just like last time, they just thought I was lying, and they just shrugged it off. One night I had a nightmare about them leaving me. I cried, and they assured me that they weren't going to leave. In retrospect, I think this was the thing that made me turn against them the most. They made a promise, so I wanted to test that promise for all it was worth. What could I do to make them break it? Lastly, when I came out to them I was trans, they didn't accept me. Granted, I didn't know the word trans yet. All I knew was that I wanted to cross-dress. But they took me to the same psychiatrist as before and essentially treated me like I was screwed in the head for wanting to cross-dress. That was the final line to me. At that time, I stopped feeling neutral towards them. I wanted them to actively suffer. It took them a while, but I suspect my dad caught on to that. I remember one time he asked me something like, "You don't even know what love is, do you?" And I decided for once in my life I wanted to be truthful. And I told him I didn't know. Of course, shrugged off and ignored. It was a constant fight, and eventually they broke their promise, and they left me in a group home when I was 11. Which makes sense. I kind of deserved it at the time. It was at that time that my conscious self started genuinely thinking that I may have been a bad person. It wasn't until I was 14 that I fully grasped the situation. I haven't talked much about it yet, but I've loved anime ever since I knew what it was. I was super into manga as well. The group home that they sent me to a different group home every single week, full of intensive treatment for people to try and figure out what was wrong with me, giving me pills and such and such. I can safely say that the pills and therapy did little to nothing, yet one thing there changed my life forever. They didn't really have much to do, and since I tend to be much of a night owl, I was forced to read. They really only had one manga. It was there sorted in the middle of other random books. There was one manga. Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicles. The story is about a girl named Sakura and a boy named Sauron. Sakura was a princess, and Sauron was a commoner. They were both completely in love with each other, so far so good. I knew blatantly well that Sauron was just going to use Sakura for his own selfish desires eventually. However, I couldn't have been further from the truth. Sakura's memories are magically removed and scattered throughout the universe. It became clear in the second chapter that in order to restore Sakura's memories to her, the price Sauron would have to pay, that she would never be able to remember him. I expected Sauron to just leave her at this point, but I was shocked. He puts himself in harm's way over and over just to save the girl that he could no longer use. Just like Nana, I was forced to confront an existence that my current worldview couldn't comprehend. It was then, at that moment, that I thought, is that what love is? And I thought it would be nice to someday be loved. At that moment, I changed from being a heartless monster into a die-hard romantic. I began to think that maybe my kindness wasn't a weakness. I unburied my empathy that had somehow survived all this time. However, at the same time, my eyes were opened to what a horrible person I had been my entire life. It was very clear to me that I wasn't worthy of being loved.
何どういうことです？
ナナさんが死んじゃう。
早くしろこのバカ犬。何がお友達だ。私はずっとお前を見下してた。ずっと便利な犬だと思ってた。今までだって何度も利用していたんだぞ。分かったか。私はこいつと同類なんだ。お前みたいな犠牲者は大嫌いだ。
罠って何です？
気が小さいことでみちるちゃんを追わなくていいのか。
いえ！
そうだな。お前を泳がすだけ泳がして目障りになったらいつも通り策を巡らしじっくりと罠を張ってどこまでも機会を待つ。みちるさえいなければ。
Nana's experience with family mirrored my own experiences with family. The way that Nana buried her emotions and became a killer mirrors the way that I buried my emotion and went out of my way to make others' lives miserable. The way Nana blames herself for everything mirrors how I blame myself for everything. To this day, I wholeheartedly believe that everything was all my fault. The way that Michiru opened Nana's eyes to the possibility of love mirrors my own experiences with Tsubasa. The second half of Talentless Nana episode 13, however, also mirrors my experience. Those who have seen it likely already feel the pit in their stomach, putting together where I'm going with this. During the entire time that Nana's trauma is being unraveled, a body was found. A murder that wasn't done by Nana. Throughout the 4 episodes, both Nana and the rest of the cast have been trying to track down the murderer. Just after Nana and Michiru go on a really cute date, Jin comes to inform Nana of some terrible news. The murderer is attacking Michiru. Nana ends up going and fighting off the murderer on Michiru's behalf, insulting Michiru in attempts to push her away for her own safety. To forget about her and save herself. Nana is severely wounded in the process. Due to some fast thinking on Kyoya's part, before Nana is finished off, the murderer is stopped. However, for Nana it's too late. She's going to die if nothing's done. And she berates herself for the decisions she's made. Why would she protect Michiru like this? It doesn't make sense. She was sent to the island to kill the talented, and here she was risking her life without so much as a plan to save Michiru. She's going to die with nothing in this world. Michiru once again sees through Nana's self-hatred. She comes back seeing a wounded Nana and doesn't think twice. I've already mentioned that whenever Michiru uses her talent to heal, her lifespan is shortened. Last time she passed out, and she didn't awake for a while. But now, as she heals Nana, her being too weak to stop anything, Michiru's never going to awaken again. Nana, now fully being able to move again, can do nothing but cry. When I was watching the anime for Tsubasa, I projected myself onto Sakura. It helped me feel like I had a family in some bizarre way. However, just like Nanachiru, it wasn't meant to be. Every good anime has to have an ending. After I finished Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicles, the time that I could spend with these fictional characters who were like family to me was gone. Sure, I could rewatch the series again, but it would just feel stagnant, like a time loop that only I was aware of. I was lucky to find out that there were 3 pieces of Tsubasa anime that I could watch. Tsubasa Tokyo Revelations, Tsubasa Spring Thunder Chronicle, and Tsubasa the movie, The Princess in the Birdcage. So before I go into detail about how I'm going to compare Tokyo Revelations to Talentless Nana, I'm going to establish a couple things. Tsubasa Chronicles was written by a manga author named Clamp, best known nowadays for Code Geass, but back then that was not the show that they were best known for, especially in Japan. They had mostly written more upbeat series like Cardcaptor Sakura and Chobits, and it's there that the first problem arose. Cardcaptor Sakura is one of the biggest shows in Japan to this day, mostly due to its happy-go-lucky, child-friendly nature. Tsubasa is a manga that starts off relatively child-friendly and happy and ends up changing to be much darker much later on. When the anime was adapted, the studio, of course, wanted another Cardcaptor Sakura, and decided to tone down the darker elements in the early story, and when things got too drastic, they just removed the entirety of it. The second half of the entire second season is entirely anime original, but I didn't even know that yet. Tokyo Revelations was essentially made to be more faithful to the original manga, though only 3 episodes were released. Tokyo Revelations was a complete tonal shift from the main anime. I don't think words can describe how it felt to watch the characters that I loved, that I thought of as family, being torn apart by each other. Clones and Sakura's innocence being destroyed in front of me, a complete 180 from what I expected. Spring Thunder was even more of the same, with Sakura even dying at the end. I was completely shaken. Weeks of non-stop crying, failing to cope with the loss of the family that, while obviously fictional, was very real to me. However, I didn't mope forever. When I told a friend about it, they essentially told me to write how I would have wanted the series to go. For a while, I didn't really know how to do it. I just wanted to spend time with my fictional family. But then I realized I could just write about that. However, when it came time to write it, I came to realize one thing. I'd based my entire identity on Sakura. And when I wrote the story, I decided I wanted Sakura to be her own character, and so I had to come up with a different identity for myself. I had to ask myself, who am I? If I could be anything I wanted, no matter how unrealistic or impossible it was, who or what would I want to be? While what I went through was hell, I can firmly say that if Tokyo Revelations didn't traumatize me, I wouldn't have learned how to be myself. And if I hadn't have learned how to be myself, then I just wouldn't be who I am today. If I knew then what I knew now, I'd still make the same decisions I've made. And I'm sure that Nana will grow in the exact same ways that I have. And someday she can move past Michiru's death and arise a new person. I can certainly say that when I watched Talentless Nana in the beginning, I didn't expect to have my own experiences with trauma and love mirrored back at me. Seeing Nana open up about her trauma reminded me of myself and my self-hatred. Seeing Michiru hug Nana reminded me that just because I'm a broken mess, it doesn't mean that I'm unlovable. I won't lie, I cling to Michiru, thinking that maybe by watching these characters interact, Nana would begin to heal, and maybe that would give me some closure on my own healing. Michiru's death hit me like a truck, and I cried for days on end, just like what happened with Tsubasa. Thank you to the random redditor who lent me a shoulder to cry on, and thank you to the Talentless Nana community for accepting me with open arms. I have by no means had an easy life. Abuse, neglect, trauma, abandonment, being rejected for who I am, pedophiles preying on me. I've seen people who are traumatized speaking to people that they know are abusers because they'd rather be abused than alone. I've fought and won against those urges. I've fought and lost against those urges. I've let bad things happen to me, feeling that they deserve to happen to me. I've empathized with those abusers who hurt me, feeling like I'm genuinely no different from them, all the whilst trying to hold on to my innocence, my kindness, and naivete, hoping that someday a Prince Charming will come to find me and save me from all my pain, even when I know it's impossible because I keep pushing those away who treat me with any sort of kindness. So I guess, if there was any point to my story, and to Talentless Nana's story, it's to keep pushing onwards. Even through all of the pain, even through all of the damage, I keep on moving. I'm not going to claim I'm a good person. I was never taught right and wrong as a child, and I've had to learn those things the hard way. Some things I have still yet to learn. I've made mistakes I'll never be able to atone for, and I've used people for my own survival when I needed to. But even so, I'll keep on going, through this failed Madoka Magica spin-off of a life, because I know that someday I'll reach a happy ending. So next time when you're confronted with someone or something that doesn't align with your worldview, try to understand the other person's perspective. You don't have to agree with them, you don't need to change yourself every single time, but instead of thinking that anyone that's different from you is an enemy of humanity, open yourself up and learn to listen.